Hello, welcome or welcome back to my booktube channel, Goddess of Gore. My name is Vix and I like to talk about horror, thriller, sometimes fantasy and occasionally sci-fi books every week. Today I want to talk about all of the books I read in April, so let's get on with it. As usual, I will run through the books in the order I read them, pick my top 3 of the month, and if any were a wonderful surprise. Now, I had a terrible month reading. I'm honestly surprised I even got 9 books in my ears and in my eyes. I struggled with concentration. I struggled with life in general. I half don't know what's wrong with me, and I half know exactly what's wrong with me. But the results are a complete lack of oomph and the feeling of being so alone and an overwhelming feeling, which means I have to sit down and stare at the same page for hours on end and listen to audio and not take in a single word. This is just who I am sometimes. Then I feel anxious and the cycle starts all over again. But anyway, the wrap up. And surprisingly, I got to use almost all of my pre-programmed emotions this month. I started the month off with The Cutting Room by Louise Welsh. I listened to this on audio from the library, narrated by Alan Cumming, who is a fabulous Scottish actor. And he was absolutely brilliant at reading this book to me. This is a dark thriller set in Glasgow, told from the view of Rilke, a 43-year-old auctioneer who enjoys the simple things in life: drinking, smoking and very casual sex with male prostitutes. He's not shy with taking backhanders and dodgy deals, so when he's given the task of emptying an elderly woman's dead brother's house and told to turn a blind eye to the erotic memorabilia, he agrees. But when he actually sees it, he just can't let it go. He tries to bring it to the sister's attention, and she reminds him again that she's paying him to get rid of it or just burn it. But he just can't morally let it go. So instead of honouring the woman's request, he sets out on a dark and disturbing path of drug dealers, pawn shops, film schools. It's a very moody and gritty side of Glasgow that gripped my imagination and had me on the edge of my seat. Next was What Big Teeth by Rose Szabo, and I was given this ebook by NetGalley, and this was a YA horror paranormal fantasy about a girl called Eleanor who has run away from her boarding school after being bullied for the last time. Originally sent to the school by her grandmother Persephone, she's done. She's caught a train and now she's back home to tell her she's never going back. But the trouble is, she can't remember why she was sent there to begin with. And over the chapters in the book, she struggles to fit back in with the family who seems to resent her, and slowly begins to realise who and what she actually is. And the family? Well, we have her mother, who is part sea creature and sits in a barrel of water around the dinner table. Her sister, her cousin and grandfather are shape-shifting wolves and like their meat really bloody. And family friend Arthur, who everyone is fighting for his attention. Expecting to be welcomed back with open arms, Eleanor soon realises she's not like the others in the family. But what exactly is she? Weird family, dysfunctional relationships, paranormal creatures. It kept me guessing all the way through. After that, I read Where the Reckoning Comes by LaTayna McQueen. Another fantastic book that I could have read in one sitting. It was very bingeable. A relatively short book about Myra, who now a grown-up has left her childhood town in North Carolina but comes back at the request of her best friend, who is getting married there. And it flits between their childhood, a rather romantic story of endless summers, of heat waves and friendships until it all went horribly wrong. They were a threesome of friends Myra, Jessie and Celine in the poor side of town, and although Celine was the only white folk there, they were like brothers and sisters, until one sweaty day and Myra and Jessie, an aspiring photographer, go to the supposed haunted woodsman plantation to take some photos. Myra sees something terrible, gets lost while running away and loses Jessie. When they get back, they hear about a body being found and Jessie is arrested for the murder. So when Myra is told that Celine is getting married at the newly refurbished woodsman plantation, her curiosity is piqued. Now, can I stop this here? I didn't understand this at all. Are plantation houses around like museum pieces? Like, are there places you can walk around? Are they there as a reminder of the atrocities so humans can never repeat them, like Auschwitz? Because this was set up like a reenactment place, and I found this the most unsettling thing about the whole book. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's some serious gore and horrible things in the book, but this made me more angry than scared. The tragedy that had occurred at the plantation was terrible. The ghosts that were trapped there were so sad. And don't get me started on Mrs. Woodsman and Lucy. I could have screamed. But I can't wait to see what LaTayna McQueen writes next, because boy oh boy can she write a good book. I loved how she could capture the innocence of youth and the horror of slavery in the same book. She's a very clever writer and I would auto-buy anything she puts out. I should add to the publishers in the UK that I struggled to get this book. It was an import at the time of me buying it months ago, and I keep saying this about being able to read books by people of colour. If you don't make the books available on the shelves, we can't read them and get the authors the popularity they deserve. I mean, come on. This book on Amazon today in the UK is £25.69 and 3 weeks delivery, and I'm afraid that's just not on. The next was another NetGalley ebook, and that was Together We Will Go by Michael STRACZYNSKI, and this was another brilliant, tremendously well written book. Now, to review this book I will have to use a word that I've never used on my channel before, and that is epistolary. This book is written in the epistolary style with texts, emails and journal entries, and I got to laugh, cry and be angry all at the same time while reading this superb book, told from the multiple perspectives about a bunch of strangers from very different backgrounds after they answered an online advert from Mark asking for a bunch of people to share a one-way bus ride cross country to San Francisco. Once there, they would be watching the sunset for the final time before driving the said bus off a cliff to oblivion. What I got was a wonderfully constructed story about life, death and regrets, accomplishments and hope. Along the way, this bunch of suicidal strangers form friendships unlike they've ever had before, experiences they never would have ever got to have in life, and they all learned the power of acceptance and tolerance. All they had to do was to say they wanted to die at the end of the trip. I expected this to be a heartwarming tale of not taking life for granted, blah blah blah, and it was, but way more. There's a lot of triggers in this book, so I'm not sure if it would be for everyone, but I adored it, and you should read it too. It was truly amazing. And then I had my first dud of the month, and that was Wranglestone by Darren, Charlton. And I'll be honest, I wasn't expecting very much from this. I chose it because it had zombies in it, and I was pretty much bored all the way through. I don't remember very much of it. That's how much of an impact it had on me. But from what I remember, it followed a teenager named Peter, who isn't like the rest of the male survivors in the post-apocalyptic camp in America. He can't shoot, he can't fight, and the rest of the camp don't really want him there. But after a while, he finds his calling, and that's to walk the recently deceased to the edge of the area where they are disposed of by a stranger in a gas mask. That is until his crush is killed by a zombie and he has to walk him out to die again. And that's when he finds out the truth about the outside world and the other camps dotted around. Now, I did say I was bored, but I know this book will suit someone else, so I'm not going to run it down. If you like zombie books, you may well enjoy this. I haven't read too many zombie books. I have a few brilliant zombie books on my shelves, but I find them very few and far between. But then I read A Quiet Life in the Country, Lady Hardcastle Mystery No. 1 by T E Kinsey. And this is one of Megan's from Meg with Books' favourite series, and I have to say I can see why. It was so much fun. Set in 1908 and recently widowed Lady Hardcastle and her trusty maid Florence Armstrong escape London for the countryside. But whilst out for a walk, one afternoon, they find the hanging dead body of a local man, and a mystery ensues to find the killer. The dynamic duo Hardcastle and Armstrong set out to investigate, and the whole village is under suspicion. And they soon blow the whole thing wide open. This is a great light-hearted mystery that doesn't take itself too seriously. That was a very quick read. I will be keeping the rest of the series, there's 8 books in total, on standby for when I need a palate cleanser in the future. I just want to know more about Florence. She reminded me of one of my very good friends. They can both kill a man with their bare hands. And I read this book for free on Prime Reading, and I checked earlier, it's not on there anymore, but it is on Kindle Unlimited if you are a member. Then the 2 books I read for Spring Fling, and I'll include my final day up above and the whole 4 days below if you want to watch that. And it started out with a very middle of the road thriller by Megan Miranda, The Last House Guest. And the best thing about this book was the twists. I wasn't particularly taken with the characters or the story. They weren't very interesting to me, and it took a while to warm to Megan's writing style. It's set in 2018 in a very small coastal town in Maine. It follows Avery, who works as a manager for a rich family's holiday rental cottages. Her best friend Sadie was the daughter of the family, who tragically lost her life off a nearby cliff in what was thought to be a suicide back in 2017. But Sadie just won't believe it. Like I said, the twists and turns in this book were brilliant. It just lacks something. But I'm reading another Megan Miranda right now before I make up my mind on the author completely. And then the second book, The Spring Fling, was The Rats by James Herbert, and this was so good. I loved all of the gory deaths. Come on, I'm not named Goddess of Gore for nothing. The delicious rat bites in lovely soft flesh. It was fabulous. There is some animal cruelty in this book, and it is called out for it by the main character. But the downer for me was the derogatory descriptions for people of colour towards the end of the book. And I think it was only one time, and I find older books do let themselves down with things like this. And I'm always interested to know why a book is still very obviously being sold and printed. It wouldn't be taken out. Part of me has an argument for this here in England. Accepted descriptive words do change with age, as they do with race and gender. So, I don't know. It's not something I personally like to see in books, but I'm not somebody who's going to throw out a book or go on a book rampage. There is far worse old and new books that use worse words. But anyway, I digress as usual. The Rats is about a bunch of human-eating giant mutated rats running amok in rundown London suburbs, and it's the job of the locals and the government to do something about it before it spreads to the whole country. No one is safe from those furry fellows, and there are many gruesome deaths of animals, children and adults before a way to kill the rodents is found. It was such a fun, quick read, definitely doable in one sitting. And then the final book was another NetGalley ebook, and it was the incredibly long Other People's Clothes by Calla Henkel. Now, I was reading this on ebook and it certainly felt a lot longer than the 320 pages that Goodreads say it was, but I clung on to it for dear life, and I'm so glad I did. The story follows Zoe, who, in order to get away from her life, decides to transfer her art degree from America to Berlin, and along with fellow American Hayley, they end up renting an author's apartment as they try to fit in with the German art scene. Now, I'm not sure why the author chose to go into so much detail about Zoe's bulimia, but she did. She made a very big deal about it for apparently not much reason, so that annoyed me. Pages and pages of Zoe purging was not called for. I got it. Zoe was bulimic. And Hayley was such a vile character. They basically don't fit in with any of the crowds in Germany or university, so they stay in day and night until they start to notice things going missing or moving around the apartment. So they suspect the landlord. The author is spying on them, and from recent interviews with the author, they suspect that the book she is writing, her latest novel, was about the two of them living in her apartment. So they decide to give her something to write about and start acting outrageously. Dull, dull, dull. But I was taken completely by surprise right at the very end. I had the rug well and truly taken from under me, and for about 5 minutes I was stunned. But then I thought that was not worth the time it took me to read that book, because honestly the first 70% was so rubbish. The next 29.9% was meh. No way was it worth the hours of reading for one line. Infuriating, but still. So now I have to choose my top 3. Play the music. Number 3, Together We Will Go. Number 2, The Rats. And number 1, When the Reckoning Comes. So what was the biggest surprise? Lady Hardcastle, of course, having that life in the country. So that's it. April is well and truly wrapped up. Not the best, as I said, but I do hope it's the worst of the year. Let me know what was your favourite read in April. Thank you so much for watching. As always, like and subscribe if you want to, and remember, don't forget to cut your fingernails. I'm going to do mine later. Until next time, bye bye.